What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Arnold, aka the Dreaded Vegan, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be reacting to probably one of the most mild-mannered, soft-spoken, yet also most impactful vegan activists that we have. And that's Earthling Ed. It's going to be kind of a short video today, but he talks about the label of being a soy boy. Alright, so let's get right into it.
There's really important roots to this, isn't there? So like if you go back to, again, we're nomadic beings, the men are the primary hunters in these nomadic times. And so obviously there's a connotation that's where it comes from. Like you eat meat to be manly, but actually if we think about it, the act of killing the animal wasn't the masculine trait back then. It was the act of providing for your homes, right? It was the masculine trait back in the day.
Starting off with a very profound statement. It's the truth. Like back in ancient times and back in caveman time and stuff like that, the whole thought wasn't necessarily specifically about eating meat that made you manly. It wasn't that specifically because it's a much deeper trait. It's more about being the provider for your family, making sure your family is taken care of by whatever means it was. It in itself was the hunting back then, not necessarily the hunting of just like I don't even want to say the hunting because technically that's not really where I'm trying to go with this. It's more about just the providing of taking care of your family, of being the head of the household and making sure that your family is safe and and survives.
Gender roles change, right? But this is back in the day, right? The masculine act was to provide and to look after and to defend. But we've conflated that with the masculine thing being aggressive, but also killing animals. And so you translate that feeling to a 2019 context, and you have people thinking, actually, to be manly means to eat meat, but actually to be manly doesn't mean to eat meat. It means to look after, right? And that would be the direct correlation. But we've conflated that so much. Now, obviously, it's not just about like primal intuition that drives this culture, and like advertising plays a massive part. And so in America and Australia particularly, I don't know about here, in the UK it's not as bad, but in America and Australia, it is heavily, heavily perpetuated in advertising that men eat meat, and also by eating meat you get women, right? Because these takeaway adverts like Carl Jr.'s, Subway, Burger King, it's all about the fetishization and glamorization of eating meat, and that's somehow making, getting women to find you attractive, and it's
that's something that I've kind of dabbled with in my mind as far as how that really works, because as someone who obviously is in a relationship now, but I've been not in relationships before. I don't think I've ever had a conversation with a young lady, and in the midst of that, we talk about what I eat. I don't understand that. I don't understand the ideology of, and if you want to be considered manly and get all the girls and be macho with machismo and this and that you have to eat meat, because realistically that never comes up in a conversation. That's kind of one of those conversations where you don't really need to have, because if you feel like, the likelihood is if you're a man and you are approaching a young lady, the likelihood of you coming friends and I eat meat, they're gonna be like, so, cause it just seems unimportant when it comes to building a relationship with somebody. Obviously, down the line, or if you've kind of reached that next step in that beyond the conversation, then obviously, you would need to provide her the information of what you do eat and what you don't eat and this and that. But that's not really like the drawing point, if I'm making any sense. It's not. It's typically not one of those things that pull women in. Is that you eat meat, so they're like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. Let me try to date this guy, or let me try to be around this guy because he eats meat. He's a meat eater. Like, I just this is making sense. But advertisement is like he stated in America especially. Oh my God! Everywhere you turn, advertising about meat, animals. Oh, meat's great. Meat's manly. Yada yada yada. Meat makes you strong. Meat gives you protein, and meat makes you strong and muscular and manly and what? Nothing about that makes sense realistically, but apparently it works because it's been working for a very long time. So I don't know.
It's really grotesque when you watch these adverts and you simplify what's happening in these adverts and what's being reinforced to people, but it really, really works. Like, advertising is so powerful. So now you have this idea of that, and then as a vegan, I get accused of being a soy boy, right? And now I am a soy boy because I love soy. Like, that's fine. I drink soy milk, I eat tofu. But the idea is being a soy boy, you're feminizing yourself, right? Because there's phytoestrogens in soy products, which there is. But phytoestrogens are plant hormone, and there's no clinical data to show that plant hormone phytoestrogen has a negative impact on your hormonal levels, your mammalian hormonal levels.
Which is, he's probably going to talk about it, but I like to interject. Yeah, this whole idea behind like phytoestrogens giving men man boobs and all this stuff like that, and you're gonna be extra feminized and stuff like that if you're eating soy. And this, I think that's those things come from a place of ignorance and not understanding how things work, and not understanding how phytoestrogen actually is more or less the exact opposite of what typical mammalian estrogen will do to your body, one. And two, not knowing that there's actually significantly, I don't remember the number, but either way, there's a significant amount more of mammalian estrogen, the kind of estrogen that it would feminize you, if it would feminize you, just for the sake of argument here. That's the kind of estrogen that would feminize you, but that's not in soy products, but it's actually in the traditional dairy products. It's in the mammal milk. So like your traditional cow's milk. There's actually a lot more mammalian estrogen in cow's milk than there. If I'm not mistaken, there's more mammalian estrogen in cow's milk than there is phytoestrogen in soy milk. And in some cases for soy milk, it actually, like, the phytoestrogen helps boost the testosterone, which is crazy enough to think about, which is the thing that men always argue about, that you're gonna lose all your testosterone and yeah. But from I don't know if there's any studies on it. I had to look that up myself, but from different anecdotal evidence, I've seen that it's actually boosted testosterone more than it's inflated estrogen. So, something to think about.
But guess what has estrogen in it? Dairy products has estrogen in it. And this is the paradox that we live in, where people who consume plants are being said they feminize themselves, and they're soy boys, by people that drink gallons of milk that has actual estrogen in it. And like, there's just no sense of irony. No sense of irony. It's beautiful, but also disturbing.
Right.
So I think there's this huge social stigma that exists, and it's like, this idea that we have to reinforce these tropes of what it means to be a man. And so almost eating meat's a stamp of that dominance and authority, and is a reminder of kind of like more archaic and transgressive masculine traits and roles,
right.
Which is interesting. But it also applies to class. They did a study. And so they had people from different socioeconomic class, from below the line up to very, very wealthy. aristocracy almost, right? So the whole spectrum. And they offered two types of burgers, a plant burger and a meat burger. And there was a direct correlation that as the lower you got in a socioeconomic chain, the more likely you were to choose the meat option. So the group that chose the most meat burgers was the group that was lowest in the socioeconomic class, and the group that chose the most plant-based burgers was higher up. And so they drew the conclusion that it isn't just about meat and masculinity, it's also about meat and class, because when we feel fragile or threatened or vulnerable or like we are lacking power within the world that we live in, eating meat is almost a sign of restoring some form of dominance. Now, of course, eating meat used to only be for the affluent.
Right.
And so for people that are lower in the socioeconomic scale or chain, so to speak, it's almost as a sign of like rising themselves up to be more affluent, because we still...
Right. So that's actually fact. Like at one point in time, the only people who ate meat or ate animal products were those with more wealth. Like the higher you were up on the class chain, the class spectrum, the more meat you were able to eat, because back in time, the ideology or the situation was that meat cost more. So the higher you went up in class, the more you were able to afford it, versus the lower you were, obviously, like down to slave times and stuff like that, the less you were able to have the access to any animal-based products. And so nowadays, like when people of lower class, lower stature, now are able to potentially afford these meat-based products, or they're able to afford them now because because of I forget the word. Just the fact that they're much more affordable now, subsidies, because of subsidies and all that stuff. Like the lower class are able to afford meat-based products, but the problem with that now is that you realize though that these people in the lower classes also don't have access to healthcare and stuff like that, and so that's a problem, because as every study has shown, studying like the effects of animal products on your body, on the human body, is that these animal products make you sick. But if they make you sick and you don't have healthcare, and you're still in the lower class, even below the poverty line, or maybe even just above the poverty line, you can't afford to go to the doctor. You kind of just have to be sick. The problem, though, is that we've been trained to believe that meat is okay, but when in actuality it's making us sick, but we can't afford to go to the doctor. So, another food for thought.
Still hold on to the idea that eating meat is a privilege, which it is, especially in the quantities that we do. It's a Western privilege. That word privilege is interesting for humans. It's the worst for the animals, of course.
Right.
But it's also a sign of like prosperity and affluence. And so I think all of these things are combined to create this very challenging psychological structure within people that feel fragile and vulnerable, to think they have to do this to reestablish some form of dominance. And the ironic thing about the meat and masculinity thing is it's the most fragile men that believe this. It's the men with the most fragile masculinity that believe this. This is obviously just an anecdotal thing, which isn't really particularly credible. But I find it's those who are most fragile about how they're perceived by others, by how they're perceived by women, by how they're perceived by other men, that think they have to stamp this form of dominance, and eating meat's doing that, which is absurd, isn't it? But that's the paradox right there, isn't it? If you're comfortable in your masculinity, then why do you need to impose dominance on someone else?
Right.
You feel that you need to. I don't know.
Right.
There is probably a lot more to it that is way above my intelligence sector, right? But that's what I think, like...
Positive there. This is a very good point. If you are confident in your masculinity, comfortable in your masculinity, comfortable in who you are in your own skin, why do you feel like you need to prove to others how masculine you are, prove to others how dominant you are? Or inversely, why do you feel like you need to downplay others, that's specifically other men? Why do you feel like you need to downgrade, degrade other men if you are comfortable in yourself? If you're comfortable in yourself, then what other people, what other men engage in what you engage in should have no bearing on your masculinity. As for me, like I'm comfortable in the fact that I am a man. I consider myself to be pretty masculine. I'm not yoked up, but that has nothing to do with masculinity. But I'm comfortable enough in my own skin to even not degrade those that eat meat, because that's not for me to do, because I don't feel the need to degrade someone else to make sure my ego's in check. You know? And unfortunately, we have men that will create this label of being a soy boy as being some sort of demeaning terminology, when in reality, I mean, I enjoy soy just like Ed does. I enjoy soy milk and tofu and tempeh and edamame and different other soy products. Yet I don't think anybody would say that I'm less of a man because of it. And nor would I feel the need to portray this facade that I am more of a man than I am, or that I am a man, that I have to bring on this aggression, or this rough and tough attitude, because it's not necessary. People know I'm a man. People respect me for it. And the reason why they respect me for it is because of the fact that I respect myself enough to not feel like I need to put it on display 24/7 or degrade anybody else, because I'm comfortable in myself and my masculinity. You know.
So how do we get around that is the big question. Documentaries like Game Changers is really important. Game Changers is all about male athletes, not endurance athletes, but strength athletes, right? So we're talking like Arnold Schwarzenegger's in it. He's not fully vegan, but he's mostly plant-based now, apparently. And he's a big advocate for eating plant-based now. So we're talking about like reversing stereotypes, reversing kind of like notions of what it means to be manly. But then the problem with that, and I had this conversation with someone the other day, the problem with that is we're still reinforcing the idea that muscles equals manliness. This is a different subject. But it still reinforces the idea that masculinity is defined by physical strength now as well, right, which is nonsensical as well. But I don't know. Everything is so complex in the world, right? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's so simple, but also so complex. Isn't everything like that? Like, it's simple when you think about it, but then when you look behind like the surface level, it's like, oh Christ. And then you realize that all these men are like dealing with social stigma, social pressure, fragile feelings of identity, and then you've got people that what are we to do? I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks. I mean, like I like the last couple points he was making were completely true. It, like, in a sense of, like, I watched the Game Changer. I thought it was an incredible documentary. I think anybody, if you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out. It is a great film. But like he said though, unfortunately, even then, with all of these vegan athletes, these plant-based athletes, it's all about strength. It's all about still perpetuating this ideology that in order to be manly, you need to be strong. It correlates to strength and like physical strength. When in reality, like, again, I don't consider myself weak by any means, but I also don't consider myself like super strong, like some people that I'm close with, that I know. But that being said, like, that again, like I said before, doesn't make me any less of a man because I can't lift 300-pound bench press. I can't, that doesn't mean that because I can't, I can't squat 400, 500 pounds that I'm somewhat less of a man. So, but that's a whole conversation for another day. I just hope that people understand that the whole ideology behind this, being a soy boy or any other thing, is not rooted in any factualness. It's only really rooted when calling someone a soy boy in a negative context. It's really only rooted in insecurities. And I hope that those that feel the need to direct their anger and their hatred towards people like myself or Ed or anything, or anybody else that do partake in soy foods and stuff like that and aren't super masculine. Like, I won't say masculine because that kind of defeats everything I just said. That are super bulky and strong and stuff like that. That I hope they figure things out with themselves and understand that being a soy boy is not that big of a deal. It's really not. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Like I said, this is a shorter one, but it was actually still very informative. Again, I love Earthling Ed. I think he's an amazing person. He's an amazing animal rights activist. But anyways, definitely be safe. Stay home if you can. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.